It is me again, unfortunately, and I am coming to tell you about a book called The Bookshop and the Barbarian. Um, I picked up this book for Pride Month. It is a sapphic love story, and just like the other book, when I picked it up, I wasn't initially expecting much just because of the way that my reading year has been going so far. But I am pleased to say that I have finally found something that is good this year, some good eats. I really very much enjoyed this book. It was downright delightful and whimsical, very fantastical as well. I thoroughly enjoyed every minute, and I can say that I was pleasantly surprised by this book. I don't really have a scope of reference for the particular author that wrote this book or any type of the books or content that she is known to write. From my knowledge, the author says that they don't usually write romance books, so that kind of colored my thinking going into this book at first, not really expecting it to be good, but I think for their first try, it was a very good job. And with that being said, I'm going to get into the actual review by, of course, breaking down the characters. For this character breakdown, I'm not going to break down the characters in the same way that I did previously, for the simple fact that these characters, in my opinion, aren't really fleshed out. Also, I don't want to spoil anything from the book. So I'm going to talk about 3 characters who are, in my opinion, the key players. So first, I'm going to talk about Marabella. She is effectively the first lead in this book, and she is half of the romantic coupling in this book. Marabella is new to town and just acquired the town's only bookshop, which had been previously closed for 20 years because the previous owner died. The bookshop is named the Cozy Quill, and the running joke with this character is that she is from abroad or from far away or from a different place. If you want to figure out the mystery and why this joke is around this character, I highly recommend that you read the book because I don't want to spoil the reason now. So the next character we're going to talk about is Asteria. I think that's how you say her name. And she is effectively the second lead / love interest in this book. She is a woman of very few words. She's very tall, very muscular, and very stoic. She is also a foreigner to this particular country / kingdom that the story takes place in. She is described as being a sort of a tribal warrior from a tribe that is traditionally known to have big, strong women. She is described as being 7 feet tall with tanned skin, a mohawk, and a huge battle axe. She is not accustomed to this kingdom's traditions, so there are a lot of comedic scenes around that. And now lastly, I want to touch briefly on the narrator, which is the third, character I'm going to be talking about. We do not know anything about the narrator other than the fact that they may or may not be a green slime. In my opinion, the narrator has a very comedic voice, good pacing, and I really enjoyed viewing the story through their voice. And that is the end of the character breakdown. So now we are going to talk about the plot. I'm not going to go into great detail like I did in my previous video because I don't really want to ruin this book for anyone. I really want those who are interested to pick this book up. The book itself is not very long and is written more in the style of a slice of life. So the book starts off with Marabella riding into town on a pig wagon, This scene really sets the tone for the book. From seeing her ride into town on this comical cart, her interaction with the person who owns and drives the cart, as well as the way the narrator breaks the fourth wall to address the reader. After she hops off of this cart, she talks to a few townspeople, which is also very funny. And she talks to these people because she does not know where the bookshop is located. She did not buy this bookshop in person because she is not from this town. She's from abroad. She actually bought this shop through letter correspondence only. The sale was for the shop as well as all of the books that are currently inside of the shop. As I said before, it has been closed and sitting unused for 20 years. So she eventually finds the shop after some time, and when she goes inside, she finds out there is a gang of goblins that have been squatting in the building, and they are currently asleep on piles of books. So she tries to wake up these goblins and tell them, hey guys, y'all have to leave, like I own this place now, I don't want you sleeping in here. And they kind of just ignore her and go back to sleep, and they don't really care. So she decides that she's going to do this the complete legal and responsible way. She's going to go find the captain of the town guard, and she's going to evict them. And when she goes and finds the captain of the town guard, he's basically like, yeah, we can't do that, which immediately confuses and disappoints her. So she's like, what do you mean? I can prove to you that I own this shop, and I don't want them there as the owner. Like, how can I open a bookshop if there are goblins currently sleeping on the said books in my bookshop? That doesn't look good for business. He essentially tells her, yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, but we can't really do anything to goblins anymore because they are technically an endangered and protected species now. The king has decreed it because basically goblins were being murdered left and right all the time by people who want to become heroes for fighting experience. Also, ever since that decree has come around, we have decided that we love goblins. They're cute little people and we love them, so I'm not doing that. But then he leans in really close and he whispers to her, you didn't really hear this from me, but you can go to the shady part of town and you can hire a murder hobo and they'll take care of your problem for the right price. Now, if you're confused about what a murder hobo is, you would find camaraderie with Marabella because she is also confused and a little bit offended because what the hell is a murder hobo? Well, for those of us who don't know D&D phrases and things like that, it basically just means a sword for hire because they technically don't have a residence and they just wander from town to town looking for a place to do their next job. So she takes his advice that he didn't give and she goes to the shady part of town and to a bar called the Bloody Stump, and she asks around for any mercenaries or I guess murder hobos. And none are willing to help her with her goblin problem except for Asteria. And Asteria is willing to help her with her goblin problem because she is under the impression that because she is also a foreigner, the kingdom's laws do not apply to her, which is not the case, but she's not worried about it anyway. So she is like, yeah, I'll kill these goblins for you, no problem. Marabella's like, I don't want you to kill them, I just want you to evict them. I just want you to kick them out. So Marabella and Asteria go back to the bookshop, and Asteria picks up each little individual goblin and throws them out on their little behinds, and that is how their relationship starts, because Marabella ends up actually hiring Asteria to be the full-time guard of the bookshop just to make sure that the goblins don't come back. And from there, the story, that's essentially the opening, probably the first to maybe 6th chapter of the book. And from there, the two women just open up the shop together, they overcome adversity together, they read together, they bond, they fall in love, make some friends, and that is the end of the book essentially. Yeah, like I said, the book is mostly like a slice of life, so you just see them overcoming everyday problems that comes with owning a bookshop, and owning a bookshop in a world where magic and fantastical creatures exist. And that is essentially the end of the plot. So the end. Okay, so now I'm going to do something a little different. Since the plot breakdown and everything else in this video has been very short and concise parts, I am going to go over my personal pros and cons with this book that I have. And I don't mean to make this book out to be better or worse than what it is. These are just my takeaways from the book, and I hope that this doesn't dissuade you from reading the book, and I hope it doesn't overly encourage you to read the book either, and you're like disappointed because I'm like hyping it up. I'm just going to let you know the parts of the book that I enjoyed, why I think it's a good book, that I'll continue to revisit in the future, as well as things that I think that could have been worked on or improved. So first we're going to start with the pros. I think that this book, firstly, is well written. I really like the narrator. I like the structure of the book. I very much enjoyed the comical titles for the chapters of the book as well. Secondly, I, in my opinion, had a lot of fun reading this book, especially because it is such a short read. Yeah, it was just a fun, short time. And thirdly, I want to touch on the fact that there is no homophobia at all in this book, whether it be overt homophobia from people talking about the relationship between Asteria and Marabella, or internalized homophobia from Asteria or Marabella, sorry. All of the characters knew that Marabella and Asteria were probably going to fall in love. They encouraged them to confess their feelings to each other because, you know, life's short and you need to be with people that you love while you can. It was just very normal relationship problems without homophobia being a focal point. It was refreshing, not to say that I don't think people should write stories where homophobia is a point of contention in relationships, especially gay relationships, but it's nice to read a book where you don't have to read about that when you in your real life also experience it. Fourthly, the romance in this book was very cute, if a little bare bones. I really liked Marabella and Asteria together. That being said, there's lots of cute moments between the two of them. There isn't anything overtly sexual about their relationship or anything like that. It was just people finding solace in each other and a gentle type of love. And lastly, I think that the book was written very intentionally. It was very emotional at times. It knew how to make you smile, it knew how to make you laugh, and it even knew how to make you cry. It was all in all a great time for me. Like, there was no point when I was reading this book that I was just like dreading having to pick it up again. With that being said though, I want to get into the cons that I have about this book. I don't really have a lot of cons. And again, this is not to disparage you, and it's not to disparage the book, and it's not to disparage the author. I don't want to seem like I'm shitting on this book, but I do want to touch on some things that I think could have been a little bit better and would have really propelled my reading experience to, say, the moon. First, I'm going to say that the characters are very basic. I understand that you wouldn't get as much character depth or character background if you're not getting these characters' POVs, but even for a third-person point of view book, it still feels like these characters weren't fleshed out enough. I felt that because that there was so little that we were actually giving with these people's personality, that you could put literally any character in this. You could have inserted anyone into this book and it still would have been a romance. You know what I'm saying? It still would have been a good book, but like, these characters are so interchangeable, it really didn't have to be these two women. Secondly, the romance element of this book, while not overtly sexual, did not feel very deep. It was very minimal. We don't really see the characters falling in love. There are just sentences where all of a sudden they want to hold hands, or they're looking at each other, and then we're told, hey, they love each other. And on one hand, I can see how just living your life slow, like almost, it's not really uneventful because there are a lot of events that happen in this book, but there's no real peril or like danger in this book. So living a rather safe life with someone, I guess the romance element wouldn't have been so dire as it would be in other romance books. But we really just see them hanging out and reading and like doing silly little things that I guess people in a relationship, or in a romantic relationship, or people in a platonic relationship would do if they lived in such close proximity. But at the end, we're told that they fell in love while doing these things, even though we're not really given a lot of scenes of them falling in love. We don't really know why they fall in love. We don't really know what about each other they love so much. We're just kind of told that. Like I said, there's no real cultivating of that relationship on page. And I think that's it for all of the cons that I have for this book. I would also like to mention now, I don't think it's a pro or a con for me. It was just an element of the book, but I can see how this could be a pro or a con for someone else reading this book. This book has fantasy and D&D elements. Like I said, that was fine for me. I don't really have a problem reading about like monsters and witches and magic and stuff like that. I love all of that. I love books with no magic in them. I'm pretty open to what I like to read, but I do know that a lot of people don't like fantasy or magic or anything like that. Now, with that being said, there are elements in this book, but none of our main characters that we follow are magical or are like otherworldly creatures or anything like that. If you count one of the main characters being like a 7-foot tall tanned woman as being fantastical, then maybe you might have a problem with this book. But like I said, there's no magic that we see on page or anything like that. So just letting you know that, just in case like fantasy and stuff like that is a deal breaker for you. And now to conclude this video, I want to say that I really did enjoy this book, but now that I'm thinking and talk about it, I do wish we could have been a little bit more in depth with the characters and a little bit more in depth with the romance aspect of it. But despite all of that, I really, really love this book. I will continue to sing this book's praises. I was getting a little bit down and discouraged with the books that I was reading this year, that I have been reading this year, because they've all been 3s or below, which is kind of a bad reading year in my opinion, because if a book is just okay or bad, what does that say about me and my book choosing ability? What does that say about the book industry right now and things getting published? But fortunately, I was able to pick up this book, and I have gotten my first and only 4 out of 5 stars this year. If the cons that I mentioned earlier had been addressed and worked on a little bit more, I can easily see that this book would have been a 4.5 or even a 5-star out of 5 for me. I highly recommend anyone who wants to read like a cute little fun romance, something non-committal, pick up this book. It was a fun time. If you found this review to be interesting, I 100% guarantee that the book itself is a lot more interesting than anything I could have articulated in this review. Also, let me know if any one of you has read this book before and what your thoughts are on it. I would really much like to talk with someone who has read this book, or even someone who wants to read this book. Again, I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you pick up this book, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.